Welcome to Vlog 20. I keep thinking there's 20. Goodness me, that's a hell of a lot of them. And they do go on a bit, don't they? Well, this is going to be just as voluminous. That's the right word. Or is it? Maybe it's not the right word. Who cares? So, where are we now? We're still in Taiping, heavenly peace. The city of heavenly peace, the happiest place on earth, as it's classified as, well, happiest place in Malaya. Perhaps they don't regard it, they don't compare themselves with the rest. Incomparable. There you go. Anyway, so what are we doing now? Right, she's Isabella Bird, because we're following the footsteps of Isabella Bird, and if you want to follow all the footsteps of Isabella Bird, go to laurancegray.net/travel with a capital T, and then you'll find the whole list of things if you haven't been following this and you're just dipping in here. Well, this is a good dip-in place, so you can continue this. You might understand what's going on, because this is Isabella Bird in Taiping in 1879, right? And she's just gone there, and she's gone to stay with William Maxwell, the new resident of Larut, well, now it's called Taiping. Right, it's changed its name. Captain Speedy changed its name. Blah, blah, blah. You can catch up on that history. Right, so she's going to stay with William Maxwell in their house that Speedy built, which is apparently rather luxurious and rather large, because she's not just staying there on her own, but she's got a parlour and her bedroom, but also in there are the sons of none other than Sultan Abdullah. Remember, he's been kicked off to Seychelles. Well, what's he going to do with his family? Well, the British are looking after his children, and they're going to educate them. In fact, they educated them in Malacca, where there was a school there. Does seem to be dedicated to educating the sons of the various Rajas and all that, and they taught them to speak English, sort of. I'll read what she says about it. Right, she says of them, she says, a large sum is being paid for their education at Malacca. They speak atrocious pidgin and never use Malayan, in my hearing at least. They are never still for an instant. They chatter, read snatches from books, ask questions about everything, but are too volatile to care for the answers. Well, there you go. Youngsters, the youngsters of 1879. Ha! It does sound familiar. If only they had mobile phones in those days, eh? You'd never get them off it. Now they're just dipping in the books and they ask a question. They don't care what your answer is, and when they reply to you, you can't understand a word what they say, because it's all the latest lingo, which is probably what they saw. English, latest lingo is private, and they turned it into a private language. If you go to Singapore nowadays, they have Singlish, which is a great language. It's all the comedians use it. And here they have a thing called Manglish on this side, which is exactly the same as the Singlish, really. But they've got to give it make it different. But sounds very familiar. But it's quite interesting that the British are educating all these people's children. What do they become? Well, they become a class of people that Frank Swettenham warns us about. In fact, a lot of literature of the 19th century, from Indian writers and Malay writers, as well as British writers, always warned about these hybrids, they called them. People who are neither one thing nor another. The Chinese also were writing about such things, because they were going off to London to attend colleges and to work in the restaurant business, as you can well imagine, because around the dock areas there was a lot of Chinese seamen there, and they were feeding them and so on. And these people, they shacked up with their landladies. Yes. I'm just thinking of the Two Mars, and well, look up the Two Mars. I've forgotten the name of the Chinese writer that was writing about this, but that's all about this business of being in one culture and another. This what do they call now third culture kids? A lot of expat children that go to local, supposedly international schools, and they kind of get a smattering of the local culture and a smattering of American culture, because there's American teachers in these places and so on, and a smattering of this, that, and the other. And they never quite become the same as English people. They spend the rest of their lives moving around, frankly, because the world is their oyster. And in some respects, that's what these guys ended up doing. They became people who, they joined into Victorian society when they went to England, and when they came back, they joined in the colonial society and so on, and became, in many respects, the nationalists, because they've had their education, they've mixed with this class of people. Now they want the same privileges, political privileges. It's you're just asking for trouble. These people are going to take over one day. The Eurasians and the educated middle class. Excuse my coughing here. I've made this excuse all the time. It keeps coming. Never mind. But it is a phenomena that was around in those days, and there was a lot of literature about it, and it was worth reading these things. And it's you'd recognise it could be modern literature. It was a thing in those days, writing about cross-cultural, multicultural upbringings, and neither fitting in one culture nor another culture, or fitting in both, being bicultural. I know people nowadays who are quite easily bicultural. They speak both languages, many languages simultaneously, whereas us sort of monolingual Englishmen, well, we've got to change. We should catch up. I mean, I've got a bit of Cantonese lurking around, at least enough to get me chatting with a taxi driver if I'm on a drunken binge heading home from Lang Kwai Fong in Hong Kong. Usually when I've had a bit to drink, I can speak quite good Cantonese. At least I think I'm speaking good Cantonese. Anyway, that's beside the point. But, it was a thing in those days. And they were deliberately trying to change the culture. But as I've warned in many respects, many times over, history moves very slowly, and traditional beliefs kind of linger even underneath that surface layer of education of one sort, because there's another education that comes from one's parents and grandparents and one's peers. That's why each generation never really understands each other, because new things occur and cultures slip and slide and move. But as I said, history moves rather slowly. So that's what she said about that. But now with Mr. Maxwell, she approved of Maxwell as a resident, and she said of his household, Mr. Maxwell is not abstemious. Oh, sorry, not. But she wouldn't approve of that. No. Mr. Maxwell is most abstemious and is energetically at work from an early hour in the morning. There is a perpetual coming and going of Malays and an air of business without fuss. There. Well, you couldn't say that about Bloomfield Douglas. If there were comings and goings of Malays, he would have caught the troops out and been patting them down just to see if they were got a knife on them and they were going to slit his throat. He genuinely felt a certain amount of threat here. Whereas Mr. Maxwell, because he was at home, because he was brought up in the area, he was quite happy to be talking to these people, and these people were happy to be dealing with him. And the previous animosities, going up the river, burning few villages, that's forgotten, because Mr. Maxwell's a jolly good sort, and he speaks our language. Right, well, that's the abstemious. Why has she got this thing? She has to say things like abstemious. Later on, we'll see what she really was like underneath all this. And now, Captain Speedy's men, he's gone, Maxwell's in charge, and a new man is running Captain Speedy's men. This is Major Swinburne. Now then, remember the governor of Malacca, Mr. Shaw, or Captain Shaw, they're all called Captain. Whether they're captains or not, everybody calls them Captain. Officers, you see, officers and gentlemen. So it's a good name. It's like Rajah was used. Captain Rajah. These guys were Rajas. Or some of them like to think of themselves as that. Anyway, he said, Captain Shaw told her, he said, when you see Paul Swinburne, you'll see a man you'll not see twice in a lifetime. Now that could mean he'll stab you in the back and you'll be dead on the floor, and that'd be the end. Or it could be this guy's, I don't know, he's got one eye in the forehead, or he's got 3 arms, or there's something extraordinary about him. Well, he wasn't quite like that, but apparently he was a very kind of intellectual, tough character, basically. And he weeded out all the opium-addled members of his force. He kicked out the sick ones. Well, I don't know whether they did it with pay. Gave them sick leave. I think they actually did. I think Speedy was very good about that and making sure that his men got leave and other such items. So I think that was part of the culture there. And of course the bad apples, of which I am sure there were a few, at least a few according to Swinburne. he was probably more inclined to hang them, but no, he just let them go, I guess. So what else did he do? Yeah, that's right, he did that. Oh, and he bought them all uniforms. He got them all into a uniform. So now they've knocked this ragtag mercenary army, mercenary force into a proper official-looking police force. It's beginning to look organised. We're getting civilization thrown in here. Unfortunate for Captain Swinburne. Yes, we heard it. Yes, he got struck by the mosquito, and he was somewhat sick. Didn't kill him, didn't knock him out right away, but he never really recovered. He kind of began losing his cool at this point. And now, despite Mr. Maxwell's relationship with the locals being so marvellous, local Chinese did riot now and again and lay siege to the British residency, threatening to burn the whole place down. And Captain Swinburne and his men dealt with these Chinese troublemakers by shooting 28 of them. After that, he took early retirement. I suspect people thought, oh, well, he's just losing his patience here. Never mind, though. Robert Sandiland Froud Walker took over. Now, Robert Sandiland Froud Walker, yes, now then, he was a hairy-chested character, and he was just the sort of man that Isabella panted over. And I can assure you that her and him became somewhat inseparable for a while. Whether he had any inclinations towards her or not, I'm not so sure. I don't know what sort of inclinations he had towards anybody, but anyway, Robert Sandiland Froud Walker has a rather stunning statue of him in the Taiping Museum, the National Museum there. It was, of course, used to be in a pride of place in the centre of the town, but they moved it, but they didn't destroy it. In fact, they were polishing it up whilst I was there, because if you destroy these things, you forget. You don't remember what they're all about. He did a number of really good things. I mean, his relationship with the Chinese was far superior to the previous man. Yeah, when they on another occasion, there were quite a few occasions where the Chinese were surrounding the British residency and they were going to burn everything down and hack everybody to pieces. He stopped his men from opening fire on them because they were just itching. They said, well, Major Swinburne, yes, he had a way of dealing with this. We'd solve the problem straight away. No. Robert Sandiland Froud Walker, no, he was a sporting man. We've got to give them a sporting chance. We can't just open fire on these chappies. No, some of them we'll be drinking with them later on. Come on, this is play the game here. And so he called out to the Chinese and said, leaders, come forward. I want to see the leader. I need to know what your intentions are. So amongst the crowd, the leader was pushed forward, and Sanderland Froud Walker walked up to them and said, I'm not going to shoot any of you people, but I'm going to shoot you. And he took out his gun and shot them. So there you go. That's really put an end to the situation rather rapidly. That's a certain amount of an improvement in the race relations there. What did he say about the Chinese? I'll tell you what he said about the Chinese. He said, a race that knows no repose, that settles only for the moment where money is to be made with the greatest ease, that would rob their friends if they themselves should have lost their savings at the gaming table. Well, the gaming table. He was a sportsman. He could have appreciated that. But as you can see, British there did not really like the Chinese. It's very curious. In fact, the alliance between the Sultan and the Chinese and between the British and the Chinese was very lucrative for everybody concerned. They were the people that were supplying the labour and so on, and the Malays were supplying the land and the culture of the region and the history, which, of course, the British went along with. They loved all that pomp and circumstances and man knowing his place in the order of things and so on. It's a very curious relationship. Where if you go to other places, you find Hong Kong, which I know quite well. The British there got on like a house on fire with the local Chinese. There was a real sort of sense of being somewhere different, being Hong Kongers. It's the locals expatriate community very rapidly morphed into a Eurasian environment. It's a very different vibe. In Malaysia, though, that's because most of these guys were indentured labourers brought out of the back and beyond on a promise and a prayer. They were shipped into the region saying, you work for us for the next 10 years and you'll get your pay and all that, and then you'll be free to earn as much money as you like and so on. There's opportunities. In fact, for some of them, there were opportunities, usually by climbing up the hierarchy of the Chinese associations, the triads, as we would call them. But like I said, that's too many connotations with gangsterism. The secret societies, which weren't that secret, quite frankly. There was, everybody knew they existed, and everybody knew who was a member of whom because they were killing each other, right? But they wore, I don't know, probably a red sash as opposed to a blue sash, something nonsensical, but a tattoo. It was usually the dialect, actually, from where they came from. They were clan associations, and they were dialect associations. In fact, if you go to Taiping now, you find that the place is full of these little associations to do with local dialect and maintaining local Chinese dialect culture, dialects that have long since ceased to exist in China, even. What's the next thing I wanted to say? Oh, yes, Sandyland Froud Walker. He was a sportsman, right? And he played for Clapham Rovers at one point in some European competition. He was also the captain of the Sandhurst Cricket Club. Good cricketer, good footballer. He boxed. If you take a look at his nose in the statue, you can see he boxed a little bit too much. And he was a bit of an all-rounder. And one of the things that he thought would help restore order was to set up Taiping Park. Now, if you go to Taiping, the park is really spectacular. It looks a little on the model of parks in Hangzhou, which I'll just come to that point in a minute, because Sandyland Froud Walker wanted to teach everybody cricket, and of course the Indians learned cricket, but Chinese didn't, nor did the Malays. Malays picked up on the football though. Ooh, yes, Malays and their football. In this heat, you'd imagine that. Well, in this heat, in effect, badminton is the thing here because you can get air-conditioned halls and play that. That's pretty big here, but even so, football, and they've made rather good progress in their local football. I'm rambling again. Anyway, cricket did not catch on with the Chinese, but what did catch on was the pedal boats. The British brought pedal boats to that park. It's a beautiful park. It looks like it could be out of China. It looks like Hangzhou, and then you think, there's that slow movement of history and culture. This is part of the Chinese imagination. This is part of the poetry of the region. You know, the Chinese poets wrote about floating on the river in the boat, seeing their reflections in the water. Beautiful women sat in the boat with their parasols above them, their hair done, and young men ogling them and longing for them, writing rather passionate notes to them, and so on. Yeah, all very interesting. And you can see it's there now, right this moment. And it was all down to Sanderlands Walker, who I'm sure didn't know a single line of Chinese poetry. But what else? Oh yes, when Isabella Bird was there, this place, the park hadn't yet been built. In fact, she said of the area where the park is, she said, all the weediness and forlornness of a superficially exhausted mining region. In other words, it was just the old mine work still there. And notice that, superficially exhausted. Weediness and forlornness. This sort of description of the places that she went to. I think only, she went to Singapore, and Singapore impressed her as well, but Penang also impressed her. Only Penang and Singapore, everywhere else. Run down, forlorn, misdriven. These places were not particularly impressive, and I guess it's because they were war zones for a long time. They were broken down places. The British were now trying to build them up again. Whether the British had anything to do with tearing them down in the first place, I'm not totally convinced about that. But it was certainly the relationship with the New World Order that ended up with that collapse of authority and the revolutions, so to speak, taking place between the traditionalists and the so-called modernisers. All these people, the place was ruined, and now it was being rebuilt. So it had to be built up by someone, and I guess it was going to be British money. You know, nowadays it's Chinese money. In fact, in those days there was a lot of China's money building that up as well. That's another thing worth reading about. Who were the capitalists? Some of the rich. In fact, I do believe the richest man in the world in the 1870s was Chinese, and he had his dealings around here as well. But there you go. The British were there. Now then, and the town was divided between the Gihing and the Heisan, and of course, Kamunting, that part of town, you can go there now, you can get your coffee and your bubble tea and whatever. That was Gihing. And she visits this place. She says, we went to Kamunting, a forlorn town, as if you didn't know, a forlorn town, mainly built of atap with roads and ditches, needing much improvement, and I bargained for some Chinese purses and visited a gambling saloon. Of course she visited a gambling saloon, eh? Now we know her. And guess who she was with? Who's showing her around? Mr. Walker. Oh, Captain Walker. Yes, Captain Walker showing her around the place. Taking her to some forlorn place. But then there's the saloon. Yes. Yeah, all fits in a pattern, doesn't it? Um, in fact, if you go, as I said, history moves slowly, and I'm pretty certain if you go around this region, this area in Taiping, you may well look at those roads and those ditches and still think they need much improvement. Anyway, after a night on the tiles there, and she describes the rather emaciated opium-addled Chinese that she came across, and she has a day at a tin mining area and looking at all these men just digging holes, like ants running around. It was all very impressive and also very terrifying, because she says, "I awoke in a fright at 2 a.m. by the noise made in changing the guard from a dream that the Sikhs had mutinied and were about to massacre the Europeans, myself included." Right, well, she's a bit worried about the Sikhs. Yes, well, they must have been a fierce-looking bunch too. They were the people that were protecting the British against the marauding Chinese, but she had deep concerns that they weren't too reliable either. Obviously, the paranoia of the likes of Sunderland, Froud, Walker, and Maxwell, and Swinburne, and so on, were infected. Maxwell, you may well think, oh, he wasn't paranoid, but yeah, he would have been a little bit concerned. And in fact, she sat in on a number of meals that they had, and they were all arguing and chatting and talking about the uprising here, and something happened there, and some about. They're particularly keen about talking about the killings of the killing of Lloyd, Superintendent Lloyd in the Dindings area, and so on, because the trials were going on. It was something that did concern these folk, and they did always carry guns with them, for very good reason by the looks of it. So she got somewhat unnerved by it, and like I said, her dreams were getting more and more worried. So it does make you wonder, and this is the question I keep asking when I hear about all this: is who benefited from any of this? Because the British administrators out there, they didn't really gain much as such. I mean, it was a job, but it wasn't making them terribly rich or powerful in many ways, and it was putting them under a lot of stress. So who was it? I thought it was sultans. Well, unless of course you were packed off to the Seychelles, where you still had a bit of money in them, but you were packed off there, and you had to do what you were told. And you had people coming in like old Major Swinburne, whose claim was that I never take any orders from a sultan. He was most dismissive of Sultan Yusuf. You had to deal with them, but you got a lot of them made a lot of money. All the people that came up with the support of the British made money. The Capitancina, well, if you managed to get up into that exalted position, or at least at the top layers there, you could make a lot of money. The heads of these associations did become quite rich people. They set up banks, they set up opium consortiums and so on, and so they could get rich, and some of them were pretty young. They got there very quickly, and they started off at the bottom and rose up very quickly. In a war environment, people were, the heads of these associations were chopping up each other and fighting. So you could rise up the ladder rather sharply. And if you came out at the right time, when one in a winning situation, you'd have your money. And of course, corporate lawyers. All these guys seem to be consulting their lawyers. There wasn't such a thing as a corporate lawyer in those days, but these were lawyers that dealt with companies and with setting up deals with arms dealers and putting together contracts for mining rights and land rights and who owned this, that, the other, and limited companies and raising funds. So they were making money. Did I say history moves very slowly? Because this doesn't sound too dissimilar to what goes on now. So who else was making it rich? Certainly not the average man in the UK, which is often said that Britain made itself rich by exploiting all the... Well, some Brits made themselves rich, but most people back in the UK were living in dire poverty, hand-to-mouth existences. This is the time of the union movements and labour movements, and Karl Marx was building up power. This is the march of democracy was carrying on. People were demanding the vote. By 1879, there was a huge new electorate there, and they were working men. They may well have been working men with jobs that could get in there, but they were struggling to get education out to people and to get health and welfare and so on. There was a big movement in the UK, and the wealth divide was enormous. You remember, these are people that the cotton mill workers, they supported the North against the South, despite the fact that the cotton was coming from the South in America. But they supported the anti-slavery, and that meant they lost their jobs. That meant their work dried up. But principles, all that was taking place at that time, and a lot of people were looking at India, and they were supporting a more Indian self-rule, and of course you had self-rule being a movement in Ireland, which could be seen as the first colony. It was a dynamic situation, and the working man was struggling to have his day in the UK. So who was benefiting from all this? Because it was when the empire finally disappeared that the average working man's wage shot up back in the UK. Suddenly everybody was much better off, which is worth contemplating and thinking about. Yes, what about the prospects of the Chinese? I said, you're an indentured. The fact is, life in China must have been really terrible for these guys, for them to venture off to these places like Malaya in those days. To get on to actually sell yourself to go off and work in the mines in Malaya, a place which was notorious for these wars that were going on. Maybe they didn't know. Maybe they thought it was a land of milk and honey. Sold a lie. Once again, I'm thinking of all the immigration that's taking place now, the illegal immigrants, the boat people, the people who are in effect indentured labourers, the people trafficking, those guys coming across the British Channel in rubber dinghies in terrible conditions. Things must be bad to drive people to make those sort of journeys. There's a fair amount of illegal immigration into Malaya. So we're seeing all this stuff that was happening then. We're seeing it again and again. There's parallels. What we can learn from those parallels, I'm still a bit puzzled myself, as you can probably tell. I was going to tell you about her meeting up with Maharaja Layla's family. Well, that'll have to wait for the next one. So that's it. Like, share, subscribe, all that stuff. Don't forget, you can read up about all this on lawrencegray.net /travel with a capital T. Got to lean forward to say that. And you can see all the previous ones. And I know it's 30 minutes. Oh, God. Some of them are only 10 minutes. Some of the early ones when I couldn't think of how to present this thing. But there you go. Have a go. Look at it all. Like, share, subscribe. And I'll see you on vlog 21. Dear me, so many of them, eh? Bye.